Hello, hello everybody. As always, I would ask you to let me know how the sound is. If you can hear me, if you can see me, I suppose, and just that you're here. So I will give several more seconds. Okay, thank you. I'm glad. Good evening. Good evening. Oh, Michelle, you're always here. It's nice to see you. Yeah, good. Okay, everybody can hear me. People are coming in. Hello to Brazil. Always happy to see people from Brazil. Oh my gosh, Daniel here's again. Hi, Daniel. Loud and clear. Oh, thank you. Oh, well, I'm trying. Hello, Julio. Anyway, all right. So, in Ireland, Finola. Oh, look at this. San Diego. Yes. Okay. Pretty. San Diego. Great to know. All right, my dear faithful audience. I thought that before I have any questions, again, I don't have exactly a topic today, like technical topic or something right off, but I wanted to talk a little bit about my teachers. Um, yes, and again, people are Sweden, Argentina. Oh my gosh, great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my teachers, just to kind of give you some sense where I was and who they were. So one of the biggest teachers, of course, in my life was my mother. And my mother's birthday was yesterday. If she were still here, she would have been 90. Well, and but nevertheless, she was born at some point at 1933 on the 26th of October. And today, wait a second, no, today is 28th already. No, okay, it was day before yesterday was her birthday. Sorry, it was day before yesterday. It was the on Thursday, so 26, 27 is the birthday of Paganini, Niccolo Paganini. So we always thought, my mother just was a bit early, just one day early. Anyway, so my mother definitely was my teacher, at least in a way. Well, for sure, actually, at some point I was her formal student, not for too long periods of time, but mainly it's because I grew up and she was a concert soloist, so she practiced a lot. She had to practice and she practiced at home. And so I grew up with this sound all the time with her practicing. And she had one of the most beautiful violin tones one can wish for, actually. So it was very fortunate for me, not just a violin sound, but just this gorgeous violin sound. And in that regards, of course, she was my most enduring influence, I would say, from before I was born and after, of course, I was born. And I wanted to play violin because I wanted to be like her. Hello, hello, people. Iran, Ireland. Very nice to see you. Um, so yes, and definitely, my father was also a violinist and also a very good violinist. Nevertheless, he didn't practice at home. I didn't hear him as much. I started appreciating his playing much later, but my mother's sound was sort of like just air that I breathed, the sound that I heard. So in that regard, of course, she was very, very big influence. And then later, I was her formal student as well. And but I cannot really differentiate what I learned from her when I was formally her student in school, for instance, when I was actually written on her roster, so to speak, and when not. And when I went to conservatory, my teacher was Igor Bezrodny. So yes, Arsenty, thank you so much. He posted one link to my mother. Okay, my mother's name is much more difficult than mine to pronounce and read, especially for English-speaking people. Her first name is Zoria, and last name is, if you see there, it's Shikhmurzayeva. So Shikhmurzayeva, many syllables and hard to see. I mean, to read, especially from English side. Even in Russian. It was a long name because it's actually a name that is adapted from Tatar language. My mother was Tatar. And for those of you who know what Tatars are, it's one of the Middle Asian um, peoples, I would say. And they're definitely more Asian than they're Caucasian. And so my mother was uh, one of them, so to speak. Michelle is asking, how was it playing for your mom? You know, Kogan and his daughter, well, Kogan and his daughter, Leonid Kogan was, of course, a violinist, a fantastic violinist, and his daughter was a pianist. So that was a bit different. By the way, my mother really wanted me to be a pianist so that I would be accompanying her all all the rest of life when I would grow up. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. Um, so yeah, it was, it wasn't very easy, honestly. And also, I think a lot depends on how a parent is. Their parents were very laid back, maybe, or very patient. My mother certainly wasn't patient with me, even though she was patient up to a certain age of her life. She was very patient with her students because she also taught in conservatory, in pre-college division, sort of, and then also, of course, in conservatory itself. So she was very patient with those students, but not with me. With me, she just expected everything to come very quickly and just boom, you give her direction and she just does it. And that wasn't the case. And plus, I was very young. I was really young when she expected a lot of me. I was like 8 years old or 9 years old. So, yeah, it wasn't very much fun. But when I grew up and became older, of course, I knew how productive it was. Even when she was losing her temper with me, all of that, still the ultimate result would be worth the, you know, the suffering, so to speak. However, yeah, my mother, in other words, as a teacher, my mother was more like most Russian teachers were. In that she was quite demanding. She was very demanding, actually, and she wanted things to be done that way, her way. It was, we were joking, and her way of or highway. She wasn't very, very rigid, and as she grew, I would say older, but she grew more and more mature in her teaching, as well as playing was always that way. But teaching, she became much more flexible, actually, which is kind of unusual. Usually, many people happens the other way around. People become less flexible with age, right? She became much more flexible later on, especially when she started teaching in the West. After Soviet Union was no more, she went to France, and she lived in France for some years, and she taught in Conservatory of Grenoble, and also taught in Paris privately, and in different people's studios sometimes. So that's when she learned a lot more flexibility, because she started suddenly dealing with very different, various levels of students playing. And instead of just denigrating all of them, which a lot of Russian teachers did, which is kind of counterproductive, my mother actually started finding approaches to, um, to how to teach them, how to really teach people of any levels, different levels. So that was good. With However, yes, she still had this approach. It was more like that way. This is the right way, and then you do it. So with my teacher in conservatory, so when I was little, I grew up listening to many wonderful violinists, and Leonid Kogan was one of them, and the other one was Igor Bezrodny. And I loved Mr. Bezrodny since I was very little. He was such a kind man, and I knew it even when I was 3 and 4. He and my mother were basically friends. They studied in the same, very close in age, and they were studying with the same teacher, with Yampolsky. And of course, Leonid Kogan also studied with Yampolsky when he was older. So they never were at school together. But my mother and Bezrodny were. And so my mother always told me how wonderful Bezrodny was, and as a musician, and as a person. And so basically, yeah, I grew up liking him a lot. And when I grew older and was nearing conservatory, I knew that I wanted to study only with Professor Bezrodny and nobody else. And okay, so thank you again. The Igor Bezrodny playing is right there in the chat. Um, so yes, and it so happened that Mr. Kogan, Leonid Kogan, actually heard me in the auditions and decided that he wanted to extend his invitation to me to his class, and that was the most mortifying thing for me because I knew that I mean, I adored Kogan, of course, I admired him, all of us did, and he had a very good relationship with my mother also in conservatory, but I knew I couldn't study with him. He was very mean with students, very mean. So there's a difference between meanness and strictness, you know. So for instance, my mother, I would say, um, was very strict, but not mean actually. But Bezrodny was a very kind teacher. So he gave a lot of choices, and everything that he said in lesson was never in a commanding sort of way, but he would say, well, I would like you to consider this way. I would like you to consider this phrase to go here. Or I would like you to consider, like what is, I would like you to consider. He treated you completely as an adult, as an equal. For instance, one of the things that I also took from him later on is that he called all of his students on the polite you, which is actually in English, it's all one you. But in Russian, we have two of them. So it's one вы or vous in French and a ты or tu in French. And so that tu and vous is familial tu or very polite and respectful you or vous, вы. So anyway, so Bezrodny called us all вы. And at first, coming from school, and everybody was in Russia, everybody calls younger people familiarly. They're younger, so therefore they're like kids, or younger people are all ты. And you get used to it. And suddenly you come to conservatory, suddenly this phenomenal musician, like, oh yes. And then he calls you вы. And you suddenly realize that the level of respect, it's pretty amazing. Anyway, so yes, you say here that cool that I kept playing despite the pressure. Yes, I mean, but you see, the point is with me, I knew I wanted to be professional violinist since I was, I don't know, from ever, because I wanted to be like my mother, and she was professional violinist, and therefore I wanted to. So there was no choice for me, in a way. I put myself into this, onto that trajectory, and later on, just that was it. I couldn't quit, even when it was pressure, even when I actually wanted to do something else at some point of my life, like when I was, I think, 10. I really hoped that I would go to the circus school, but I wasn't allowed by my mother. No, my mother and father said, no, you're going to stay in Central Music School where you are, where you belong. So anyhow, okay, so do we have any questions now that I will tell you, or I can tell you, of course, be an acrobat? Well, yeah, I wanted to be a trapeze artist, not just an acrobat, but a trapeze. Have I had students with very big hands, very long fingers? Yes, I do. I did, and I do actually right now. So very long fingers, length of fingers, I find that it's maybe not as much a disadvantage sometimes as the hand itself. If the hand and fingers, and especially if the fingers are thicker, I found that it's more of a challenge for people. But yes, I did. Um, right now I have one. He's actually, a person is not tall, but his hands are enormous. You just can see, like, proportionally, wow, he has very big hands. So so far, I still see more advantages. My brother, actually, when he was still actively playing violin, he's a very tall person, and he has big hands and long fingers, by the way. So he wasn't maybe my student formally, but of course, he's my younger brother, so I observed him grow and then later play, of course. So he had, of course, there's the upper positions most problem, correct, Daniel? I mean, upper positions. Of course, there could be something also you have to get like comfortable in, here, right, with extra length, for instance, of the finger. So I would say, I go lower. On the other hand, it all depends on personal, like, variability of, what is it, how the finger is set in the joint here, and how much they are movable this way, in a good way. So for instance, like fourth finger, for instance, if fourth finger is set like this, like this is not very good. I must tell you, this is not very advantageous at all. But it also depends on how much it can turn in this joint to the right direction, you know. So in that case, they probably don't have to be too lower. But I found that the excess fingers usually it's better to be lower, the position lower. In having a secure frame of the left hand and finding the angle of it. Yeah, third arpeggio is hyper. Exactly. I mean, they're all kind of different than these adaptable things. For me, I also have very long fingers, if you notice. I mean, mine are, longer than, like, proportionally longer than they should be, maybe in my hand. And I especially have very long first finger. See, it's longer than my third, which is, again, not very advantageous, but here it is. So in upper positions, for instance, playing things like this, for me, yeah. So either this will happen with my first, because there's just, you see, the fourth is short, barely reaching, and the first I have an excess of it. So either I will allow it to buckle this way, or it has to be buckling the other way. Luckily, in that way, I'm hyper flexible, so it can do it. I prefer, actually, I learned to just let it go basically to the nail, if necessary, like here, and then recover back. Like if I'm even in arpeggio, I don't know, you cannot see it here right now. Yeah, like maybe like this. And then on back on arpeggios, you roll your hand back and it comes back again. So in my case, at one point I was fantasizing, like, okay, I met a violinist one time who was missing the tip of the finger completely because he actually had an accident and a dog bit off a tip of his left index finger. Can you imagine? And he was a professor, he was teaching, he was a playing violinist. And so at first, of course, it's a horror story. And then I thought, you know what? It will be actually very good for me if that happened to me, because then my finger will be the right length, a good length. But anyway, so yes, that can be a problem. And also higher positions, if the fingers are not, even if they're thin, but they're excess of them. So my brother said that once he tried viola one time, a couple times he never switched, but he tried viola. It was very comfortable for him, like, because he would be just a regular frame. On the violin, he constantly played like that, feeling like this, I don't mean the tension, just the look. Even in first position, it was already in what for me would be probably fourth position, and he was like that already in the first, and then go in the upper positions, and imagine how that feels. Yeah. So how to take Russian technique bow. Russian technique in the bow, well, I mean, Russian technique, the way I know it, it's Franco-Belgian technique, basically, and maybe slightly adjusted, but it is that technique. It's not what we think about the old Russian when the bow was here. No, that I cannot teach, because I don't play like this at all, and very few people play this way. And actually, anyway, yeah. So let's not look there. Okay, so do you have favorite violin recordings that you commend to your students? Let me see. Let me go back. I mean, would you explain about the hanging the left elbow? Hanging the left elbow? I don't exactly know what you mean. Like, the elbow just have to be here, basically being this straight line with the hand. What do you mean about the left elbow? So it will be hanging that way on A string, and on D perhaps a little bit, but on A probably, and then G it comes in, and E in the least positions just barely basically go out to promote the clean lines, the straight lines, to so that the fingers are the strongest. So if you can clarify what hanging means of the left elbow, I will then say something else. Favorite violin recordings you recommend to my students? You know what? I used to have some, but my favorite recordings change with time. I used to like certain performers, and then I realized I don't. Maybe I'm kind of over them, and I don't like them. I mean, I used to love everything by Isaac Stern. Old recordings of Isaac Stern. I just loved Isaac Stern at one point more than anybody else. Um, but I kind of, grew out of that just blanket love, so to speak. I kind of go by who a lot these days, people go to YouTube. And so I would look who is there, because some recordings are there and then they disappear, then they are taken out or whatever. And so I kind of more go by this, what I recommend at this point. Probably Daniel Kurganov probably will have a lot more on his channel also, right? Really great recordings. I mean, pretty much a lot of those recordings are fantastic. Okay, so what I would say in terms of what I recommend always, especially to people who do play Sibelius, I always recommend to listen to Kavakos playing the original version, the first version of Sibelius Concerto. I find it completely unsurpassed as far as that version goes. There are two more recordings now. I believe I saw two anyway, except besides his, but his is completely unsurpassed. And I love everything that he does, especially the cadenza at the end of the first movement. It's like it's out of this world how he plays it. It was written great in a great way, but the way he plays it, that's what makes it amazing. Um, so Michelle says, yes, I find that in the upper position of the long finger, my fingers are highly arched. It is a challenge for sure. Yeah, I mean, they're like really arched in my case too. Is your approach to teaching different based on the student's hands? Of course. Yeah. Well, you know what? I said of course, but it's molded to students' hands. It's not necessarily um, it's not necessarily completely different. But yes, if the student has smaller hands, I would suggest certain things. Usually, again, that is the thing about private lessons, like one-on-one lessons, is that there is theory, and then there are some people who by theory should do things like this way, this way, this way, this way. You see them in person, you realize that nope, they should not be doing this, all of them this way. Some of them they should do it that way, which is kind of theoretically for a different type of hand. You know what I mean? It is individual. And that's why when we look at violinists, we sometimes see people completely like, well, what is correct? One plays like this, another plays like that, and both sound great. Well, if they sound great, it means that they found a way to function this way, each way, you know what I mean? Speaking, by the way, of violin recordings, also that I almost always recommend to hear at some point or another, Joseph Hasid. And I pronounce him as Hasid. Some people say Hasid, like a Hasidic Jew. I mean Hasid, but since he was Polish by origin, I say more in Polish Hasid, Joseph Hasid. And for those of you who doesn't know, maybe 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 Arsenty, if you could find maybe the link to Joseph Hasid. He recorded only one I guess side of an LP or one CD, and then he was no more. Anyway, but he was an amazing player, and what it was, of course, completely mind-blowing that he did it at the age of 16. Not technically, what he did, even though technically some things that he does, it's hard to imagine to do it this way. Trills, if you listen to old recordings or any young contemporary recordings, doesn't matter, listen to trills. The truly amazing virtuosos, they have these the quality of the trills is different than for most regular virtuosi. They're fast and so clean, and Hasid, of course, is like top of the line there. Absolutely. That, speaking of technical things, or for instance, his flying staccato in um, La Capricieuse by Elgar. He's playing there. So Capricieuse, La Capricieuse there. Absolutely. I mean, I every time almost I break down into tears when I hear his Playera, Sarasate Playera, and also Dvorak. There is uh, what is that? Dvorak Humoresque. He's playing there. Yeah, I think those three are my favorite from that disc. Maybe I forget. I mean, he's playing several more pieces. Oh, about Hebrew Melody, of course. Hebrew Melody. Oh, just okay. Do you have any visualization resources, practices to improve playing? Yes. Visualization is the technique that sits in our brain. And if we use it, we learn how to use it, it is a fantastic technique. So when you say the visualization resources, I don't exactly, maybe resource. Yeah. There's one book, but I'm not sure it's in print anymore. There was one book about practicing visualization, and I used to have it, and I used to remember the person who wrote it. Um, I will put it under after the live stream is over. I will look up among my books, and hopefully it's there, and I will write the name uh, of the author of it. It's quite a long time ago published. I guess probably end of last century already by now, but nevertheless, the principles are all the same. The principles is that the true visualization, you can improve your technique, you can build your technique, you can also learn memorization, for instance, the same way by completely visualizing. But okay, so right now I will give you the visualization improving technique. Basically, all of our technique is a form of visualization if we do it, if we process it correctly. You want to learn a passage, right? You want to learn a passage. You go by fingers, that. Then you start. If you imagine how these fingers will go without playing them, after you play them several times, for instance, I don't know, something. In order to play that faster, like this from get-go. Of course, it's an easy example, obviously, but nevertheless, what you will do first, so you do your shifts, you finish your scale, then instead of repeating it right away and repeating it away, you can repeat it completely in your mind only, but you're repeating everything. You're repeating the sound. You imagine how it feels to play. You imagine just what you just played, how light your shifts were. Hopefully they were light. Even if they weren't, you feel them as light, because of course you have to have some basis to it. You have to be able to execute a light shift on the violin with your fingers at some point earlier, but then so when you're going to use your visualization, you rely on the memory of knowing how to perform that without pressing, but over pressing. Okay. So, but meanwhile, you're not playing. So I usually close my eyes when I do this. I would close my eyes and I would imagine, and I would feel my movements, feel all the fingers, how they move, and what the bow does and how the bow moves, both together. And what I found is that, well, not only I found, everybody knows this. I mean, who does visualization? Is that the brain doesn't know the difference whether you actually played it many times or you imagined that and therefore you played it there in your mind. The brain doesn't know the difference whether it was the appendages that were playing or it was just happening in the mind. So then when you take a violin, you repeat exactly what you just did, and it works just as it did. If you did it correctly here, it will work correctly there. I a lot of times speed up the tempo for my students with my students in lessons. Like they have trouble like getting from slower tempo to really fast one in a difficult part of the piece. And I have my little steps how to do it, and it works 100%. Never fails. Never fails. Okay, let me see. I go back right now because when I change teachers. Okay, wait a second. No. Positions, teaching based on unique hands, bow focus, contact point, etc. Yeah, okay. Something about bow focus is a good way to say it. It's where the bow meets the string. So usually all our life this is all backwards. All our life we try to play in the number 3 contact point, as I call it. So I adopted Flesh's system, Carl Flesch system of numbering contact points. So contact point is the point where the bow meets the string. Okay, contact point, sound point, sounding point, all the same. So Carl Flesch called number 1 is the one that is closest to the bridge, but not on the bridge. Number 5 closest to the fingerboard, but not on the fingerboard. If you can, okay. Oh, sorry, it should be really. It's hard to do it through the camera, anyway. But not on the fingerboard yet. So I tilt the bow so it looks like it's on fingerboard, but it's actually not. And therefore it's 5. So 3 is right in the middle, and then 4 and 2 obviously are between 1 and 3, and 3 and 5. Okay, so why they're important? Well, because they're part of the physics of creating sound. There's speed, pressure, and where you are for us because of the tension of the string, right? And length of the string also. Tension of the string, thickness of the string, length of the string determine where you should be. But you know what? Trying to memorize all of this, I don't know. Maybe some people can do it. If maybe I would go by sound, and I first always did it only by sound. Actually, my Russian teachers never taught us. Unfortunately, I think never taught us the system of contact points. I came up with this myself at first when I was still teaching at Interlochen, younger people, and I wanted to speed up their progress. And so yes, to say you have to be playing in the middle. The bow has to be between the bridge and the fingerboard, exactly in the middle. So now there's a number of it, number 3. So what you do, of course, you have to be able to draw. Okay, I will not be looking in there. You draw your bow completely parallel to the bridge, we usually call it, right? So we have the line extending there, imaginary line, and you draw the bow there. So once you learned how to draw it in the middle point, which is number 3, then you also have to practice drawing the bow in the different ones, and that becomes more challenging. So, but yeah, the bow focus or contact point is really important. Okay, when you changed teachers, did they want you to change any fundamentals of your left hand bow handle playing? I changed a couple of times. I had to relearn things I thought I already knew. Well, luckily in Russia, it was very rare. Well, yeah, it was very rare when people had to completely change something, because we had back then in Russia, Russia meant Soviet Union when I was there. So everything was so centralized, and we had very good methodology written out, printed. And because like Moscow Conservatory and St. Petersburg conservatories were like the 2 top conservatories in the country. Well, I mean, Kiev Conservatory, of course, in Ukraine was also very, just amazingly excellent conservatory. There were several more, but still, everything was very centralized to Moscow, whether it's good or bad. And therefore, everybody all the teachers from all the other conservatories were often coming to Moscow to kind of absorb the latest teaching, or the teaching of the greatest teachers. They also, of course, would go to St. Petersburg because there were very phenomenal teachers there as well. Anyhow, so it was pretty uniform all throughout the country. And only if you got somebody who was kind of lazy with students, or Sometimes young students will study with a teacher who would be adjusting things to these young hands and so forth, and not playing very well. And then when they go upward, that's, well, actually, I had to go through this myself. I was 12 years old, 13 years old when I went through from my formal teacher away to my next formal teacher. I spoke about my mother being my teacher, but again, my mother was kind of haphazard teacher of mine. She didn't see me that often. Um, and even when I was formally her students, my mother concertized a lot. She was gone a lot. So, she was adjusting my technique here and there, but it was more like patching rather than the whole system. And it turned out that my childhood teacher wasn't very good at all, or she, just allowed many things to slip by and many bad habits to set in for me. So when I was 12 or 13, I went to my good teacher who started to like putting my hands in order. But since then, no, since then, nobody needed to do it. And what I did not grasp at the age of 12, 13, I later did by myself. To hear from here and observations on how other people play and how I play, comparing and so forth. Yeah. So I know I never again had to redo everything. Do you have any visualization? Oh, I already opened that. Did you study with Mr. Gingold? Can you tell us any stories about him? I did not study with Mr. Gingold. The story about Mr. Gingold is only one that I can, my own story is how I met him. I did play for him one time. So I came to this country. And I came and very quickly into Interlochen Arts Academy, and I came to Michigan, so I was close to Art Academy, and they invited me um, to teach there quickly. Soon after I came, I was very fortunate actually when that happened. But anyway, so I never went to a master class. And that time I saw that Indiana University was having a master class or like some little small sessions during summer. And master class teacher was Ifra Niemann, back then very much alive and well, a very big teacher, very well-known professor, pedagogue he was, Ifra Niemann. And he was good friends with Mr. Gingold. And Joseph Gingold was, of course, the face of the Indiana University School of Music for strings. And so anyway, so it was on the campus of Indiana University, and I decided to go to my first ever masterclass. Masterclass was to be with Ephra Niemann. I had no idea whether that I would meet Mr. Gingold or not or anything. But I came there, and there also happened to be a concert, live performance of Beaux-Arts Trio. And it was my first time. Of course, I knew the name Beaux-Arts because they were world famous already. And suddenly here I am, the girl just like from, from the other side of the world, from the Iron Curtain, and suddenly this is all happening. So I'm in the audience of this concert. So I met some young people, they met me. And one of them studied with Mr. Gingold at that time. And so she kind of like got me to be connected to her right away in the concert, showed me this. And then, oh, by the way, there's Mr. Gingold in the audience. I was like, oh my goodness. So she gets me to Mr. Gingold, and very unexpectedly, even for her, I mean, she wasn't Russian, but she knew that he didn't really speak Russian to even Russian speakers. But for some reason, he spoke Russian to me just there in the concert. He asked me how I was and how I liked the concert, and wow, amazing. So then he asked me, well, do you want to play for me? And I was like, yes, of course, of course, of course. When? How? So he told me to come next day in his lunch break, which he oftentimes did. So he wouldn't go to lunch, but he would listen to somebody, I guess. And so I went to his studio. Again, this girl helped me to get to his studio. And I played for him. I played for him, I can't remember what, but I do remember I was playing Rondo Capriccioso, Saint-Saëns Rondo Capriccioso. And I had no idea because my teachers never did it. Nobody ever did this. I never saw it. But he had his violin in his hands, right? And he started accompanying me. I was like, I'm playing and thinking, oh my God, this is a totally new experience. Anyhow, so yeah. And so after that, I remember asking him, so what you would, he told me what he thought. He thought he was very, he was praising, uh, very complimentary, I should say. Well, I mean, I did play things for him that I already learned and concertized with, I knew them really well. So then he asked me if I wanted to come to have tea with him in his apartment. Of course, yes, of course, of course. And so the girl is back, with me, his student. So, oh yeah, she knows where I am, but she would be coming from some lectures, and you can just, take a cab. And I said, okay, okay, fine. And then of course I know that she will tell me how to find his address. Obviously, she will know because she's his student. So then I see her and I say, so what do I tell the cab driver when I get a cab to go to his apartment? He actually lived in an apartment, not in the house. And she said, "Oh, you don't need to say. Just say, take me to Mr. Gingle's apartment in the city of Bloomington, Indiana." I said, "Really? Like every cab driver will know where his apartment is?" She said, "Oh yeah, of course." It was surreal. It was surreal. It wasn't like it was a village. Bloomington is a small town, but it is not a village, you know. And that was true, though. I got in the cab and I said, "I need to go to Mr. Gingle's apartment, please." He said, "Oh, okay." Drove me to his apartment and I was there. And then Helena came, the girl's name was Helena. And we had this tea and Mr. Gingle was telling stories. But you know what? That I will tell later in some other live stream, okay? All right. Um, can you do a video in the Russian language? It would be nice for you to reach out. Russian is a beautiful language. Thank you. Well, I've been thinking about this because I did. I got many requests actually from Russian speakers to do something in Russian. Of course, I can do any of these of my videos in Russian. It's just time, like because we have to film it again over it again. We have to find time to do it. But yes, I do think that I need to do my well, not mine necessarily, but the vibrato sequence in Russian also, so that all Russians know, remember, or refresh their memories, or learn if they didn't learn before. Okay, now you also saw that Arsenty put the Hasid playing right there. Okay. Simon Fisher in Basics emphasizes, or just a second, also good Razan. Okay, Simon Fisher in Basics emphasizes hanging the left arm to find the proper elbow position. Ah, that's what you mean. I feel the pressure on my head as the violin acts as a pivot. Okay. Yeah, all right. So, well, I guess, it probably is this then. The hanging would be, I believe that will be the part of alignment. So, sure. Yeah. There's so many things in violin that we can describe in a different way. And a certain person would use these words to describe it, and the other person some other words, and you can get really lost because terminology, you need to agree about this. So I'm not sure what I would call the hanging bow. Probably it's a good thing on A string, but it cannot be hanging on G. I don't think. I mean, I need to look at this book. I actually have the basics somewhere. Yeah, I need to look into this. Diana, hello. Diana also always comes. What is causing my beginner daughter's floppy bow? The stick flops back and forth on short fast note. Maybe too much finger flexibility on right hand. Oh, you mean? Let me see. So when she's playing like this, I cannot look at the camera and do it honestly. Is that what I'm showing, Diana? Is that what you mean? Or something else? Because if that's not what I'm doing right now, I'm not doing it with the fingers at all. I'm just doing it with the wrist, like this. Because, I mean, we always say that wrist has to be involved. So tell me if that's what you mean. If it's not what you mean, then I'll try something else and maybe it's something else. But otherwise, yeah, it's this. That would be the wrist thing. Now, fingers, you said maybe a wrist finger. Fingers should not do it if they. I mean, plus this is useless. What I did with fingers right now is like completely useless. It shouldn't be done. It's like there's no purpose whatsoever. Um, but but well, anyway, tell me if you saw what that flop is. That the floppiness? Oh, something like this. Okay. Well, again, that one is more often done by a lot of people when the teachers require the wrist movement, so that the wrist is involved. So wrist basically the wrist should be involved in such a way that when we first start the movement, we always go either from here or that one, depending on part of the bow, right? So if you're in the upper part, it will be mostly upper arm movement, of course, but nevertheless, you can imagine that is the forearm moving, all right, as an image. So then the movement here will be kind of breaking in the wrist, like that's at the frog. Now, when we go to let me rearrange what I have here, in the middle of the bow, there's also that type. There's also that type of movement, of course, because that drags the bow really nicely on the string, right? So then what we usually tell our students is like that has to be there. You have to use wrist to move, to détacher, okay? But when the bow doesn't flip, or what is one of the most important things is to tell for a student to understand that the main thing is that the tilt of the bow, if they use tilt or they play flat hair, it doesn't matter, it should not be changing. Okay, so for it not to change, your one's fingers should not be completely glued to the string, to the stick. That's in my terminology. So the fingers are wrapping around the bow and they are immovable, really, and you only move the wrist, you will be actually changing then the tilt or the angle of the bow. If you are uh, uh, allowing the fingers to perform the reciprocal movement to the wrist as they naturally would, then the bow will be staying without changing of the tilt or angle. Okay. It's hard to get. It's not so much. It's about flexibility of the fingers. No, it's more than they shouldn't be grabbing and staying exactly in the same position. However, if she's playing with very little bow in the middle, like this, you don't really need any. I mean, the reciprocal movement here will not happen. It just doesn't have time for it to occur. So in that case, but again, I would not clench with fingers. She's probably somewhat clenching. Usually, all beginners or intermediates do, because we're still finding our way with that stick business. So let's see. Do I teach lessons? Brian Merck is asking me if I teach lessons. Of course, I teach lessons. That's all I do, day in, day out. I teach lessons. Or you mean like lessons outside of my university? Yes, sometimes I do. I mean, I do have several students who I do teach outside of university. Most of of course, my load is university load. But yeah, I do have some students, and then occasionally I can see some other people more on the lesson consultation basis. Not, right now I cannot add any students like to my calendar, but at some point I did add those that I with me right now. So yes, that happens. Um, Alston Liu, thank you so much for coming to stream. I think, oh yes, that's what Alston wrote. Yes, I probably skipped you. Let me see. Oh yes, I guess I skipped several. I'm so sorry. Okay. In first position, my wrist tries to counteract the rocking back motion by arching towards me. As in my wrist pivots towards the neck of the violin. You mean in vibrato, Alston? Is that in vibrato? That's what you mean? Or so that happens? My wrist pivots towards the neck of the violin. Is it in stationary position or is it in vibrato? Because if it's in this position, it doesn't do that. Just like goes. I call it pivots toward the neck of the violin. I have problem understanding words, honestly. I guess rocking back motion by arching towards me. Please clarify. So I call this situation, I call it after very little student of mine many years ago, she called it, my wrist is poking out. Okay, so that's how she called it. So I call this now wrist, I called it the poking out wrist. Okay, so the poking out wrist, we don't want it. See, let me see. Uh, even read higher. Okay, I give. Sorry, Alston. Okay. You watched my wrist vibrato, and I was wondering if you have any tips on isolate. Okay, so I got it. I got. Um, yes. Well, the main tip of isolating the wrist are two of them. One is that's why we're doing it here at first. So you isolate the wrist by um, touching the violin. So then you can for sure know that you're not using the arm. That's number one. Number two, you can do this in third position or like fourth position, third position. And then in that case, you will only go back because going upward is not comfortable. In this case, you will mostly use the backward movement, which is perfectly fine. Both of them are good. Like this. Again, you're touching, and therefore you're not going to be moving. You know that you're not moving your arm. Okay, now I understand it. Yeah, so that's what you meant. Okay. So now when I vaguely remember myself being little and dealing with vibrato at some point. And I think, yeah, I probably had a bit of a problem, like a lot of kids do, going down from the upper positions, like here with vibrato, and then going here and suddenly feeling like, okay, I'm in no man's land. I don't know. So sometimes I would just do that. I would just hold myself and do this, and then not hold and continue, and then again hold, not hold. Just like that. Actually, that was helpful to me. And you don't need to go all the way to the first position and be uncomfortable. You can just do it wherever you don't touch already, like second position would be. It's the same feel. And then here. So now then you said it was it was wants to do this, apparently, right, to be in this position. you know you can actually experiment with the thumb, and it's okay to put thumb. Normally I don't suggest at all that thumb goes back, right? You know it from my other videos. But for vibrato, you can try everything. I mean, the thumb can be here, the thumb can be underneath the violin, basically, sort of like this, and trying to do it against the thumb without reverting to this. You see what I mean? This is, what is bad about this movement? Well, if your vibrato sounds really good this way and you don't get hurt, I don't see why it's going to be wrong, honestly. But the chances are you're not going to feel comfortable in the hand, because this is a weakening position. This is a physiologically weakening position, and when fingers have to press and do something. Can you have good vibrato with this one? I think so. It will also reduce, but not maybe the best. That's the thing, because you reduce the area of the finger that is can actually wobble. This way it becomes, you see, and it tends to press more. So it's passable, not possible, but passable, right? PAS. But I would say, yeah, if you can do this, you can also do that. It's more reframing, your brain, and just realizing that sometimes we're stuck in the box there, like thinking, oh, that's the only way to do it. Just kind of try to be creative about this, and just like, what if I do something completely like opposite, put it this way and do it this way. Okay. Uh, Julia or Julia is asking me, do you have any advice on what to look for when it comes shopping for a quality violin playing as a child and want to pick it up again as an adult? Thanks for doing this. Julia, I again, depends on how much money you want to spend. The one thing I do, honestly, like I would not recommend, but again, I can be totally wrong about this. I don't know if Daniel is still here. Ilya Kukanov, he might know more about this. Um, if it's okay to buy the outfits, like different online stores, especially they sell the violins like pre-made. You don't try them. I usually say go try the violin, but of course, if you don't play the violin at this point, you just want to come. I mean, I still would say maybe to rent a little bit, and then you kind of know what kind of sound you want and everything, and then going buying. But if you're past that stage already, um, it depends on how much money you have at your disposal. Honestly, you probably can get a rather decent sounding student instrument, even like less than $1,000. I mean, I know it sounds a lot to most people, but the fact is that like good sounding student instruments right now, I don't think that they start below 1,000 actually. But again, there can be exception, and the higher level student instruments would go into, but we're talking professional students, okay, like students who are in college, students, they would go into like up to $20,000 by now. And it's just the way it is. I have some people in my studio who play on instruments that are probably, 1,200 to 1,500 to 4,000, but very few. And usually those are people from other countries where those instruments were made and purchased there for that kind of money, which for their money, it was actually very expensive. You know what I mean? So, um, okay, yes, Alston, I hope I answered your question. The violinist forever is asking, do we lead the shift using the arm first, or from the fingers, or from the hand? Where does the first initiation of the shift should be originated from? Initiation of the shift. Well, for that, I need to go and see how it is that I'm doing a shift. You know what? There are different types of shifts. That's number one. If I'm doing, like, let's say, that sort of shift, and let's say I do it, well, okay, I can make it expressive shift. So I will press the string when I go, right? Okay, let's see. What am I doing? Yeah, in my case, I'm at this point, I'm doing it in with my whole forearm. But my whole forearm, I feel this part, my wrist, is maybe as initiator, but it's hard to tell because everything is basically relaxed. So if your whole forearm is in hand and the wrist, if they're not stuck, like that will be stuck, then I would feel really I'm like doing it with a whole lever. But if I am not stuck in my joints, the joints will slightly react to whatever you're doing, right? So, do I say that some teachers say it and students understand it literally, like you have to initiate with the wrist and then go? That is way, way, way exaggerated. It's too much. So, when I play, I guess some impulse maybe comes from here, I suppose. I don't think this way. I think it's a forearm, but because it's sensitized, everything is already sensitive to the instrument. Yeah, I think it's maybe, I would say, more from the wrist region, but it's imperceptible. It shouldn't be noticeable like this, like, oh, you're leading with the wrist. What else you said there? Or from the fingers or from the hand. I mean, well, the hand is kind of the wrist, I guess. It depends on what you call which, right? This part, it will be either hand or wrist. I called it wrist right now. The fingers. Okay. You can make a shift by extension, and that will be, for instance, first I reach with the finger and then I get my hand there. Well, that's a total different type of shift. Or well, in that case, maybe I guess I will call it initiating with finger because it's extending. And the same thing backwards, of course. that will be the finger extending, the thumb going there, and then the whole rest of the hand follows. So yes, yeah. So it differs. In other words, how you shift is different. But I would never do any kind of thinking that when you shift everything together that you go first with the finger. That will not be a good idea. Unless you go with only one thing, harmonics, you know. Yeah, so here I would be extending and going at the same time. So I kind of, I guess, mm, lead with a finger, that one. Good string set choices. Depends on the violin a lot. Really depends on the violin. On this violin, it's Vision Titanium solo, I think. Yeah, right now. I used to play on not titanium. I guess they made titanium better. So my luthier, I go to my luthier. If something new comes around, he can suggest. I really trust him because he knows the strings better than I do, and I don't have time to change them constantly, and choose. Many instruments upgraded, I mean, higher priced instruments are doing very well with Pi also. Peter Infeld, in other words. Many people like Eudoxa, many people like Pirastro, that's got strings more. Many people like Eva Pirazzi. But good old dominant is very good choice. Yeah, also. Greetings from India. Yes, hello. Um, Thank you for compliments. Okay, thoughts on good resin. Honestly, a little bit here, I am at a loss what to tell you about good resin. There are a few quite good resins. It used to be Hill, yeah, and Pirastro and Hill, but now I know that there are lots more new. Bernadelle, people say good things about Bernadelle resin. And again, if we have some professional violinists here in the audience, please write down what you think. You probably will be more correct or up to date. I use Liebenzeller resin, and I use that resin, and I'm not going to switch ever in looking for something better. It doesn't leave residue. I can resin the bow even when I practice. Actually, when I do practice and I play a lot, I don't have to resin the bow every day even, because it is very, it just like sticks very well. And I use Liebenzeller Gold 1 or Gold 2. And right now I have a cake of resin that is there. I think I had it for 12 years, and it's still there and it still works. So, okay. Okay, I think Simon Fisher I already saw. Okay, let me see what is next here. Yes, outside of university, I think I answered this question. So it's the teaching outside of university. Do you have your thumb fully in the groove of the bow frog? I find it a bit harder to control the bow there, and my thumb ends up on the bump just before the groove instead. You know what? Actually, this is a very good topic, by the way. Yeah, and okay, here's my bow. You can see it against me right now, right? See how this is thumb grip, and then it kind of goes down here. Yeah. Yeah. So this part is from my thumb that is there. I used to hold it all the time. I was taught to hold the thumb right here. Like when I was a child, that's what we were taught to do, to put it right before that little, the frog beginning and between that and thumb grip, which I believe wasn't very good. That was not very good. So thumb grip in English is thumb grip, and I think it's a good thing to think about this thing as a thumb grip. So that's where the thumb should be. It should be protecting that the thing has to be protecting the bow from our thumb. So I know that many people by now, those who start playing here, they switched of playing really on the thumb grip. Everything remains the same, but just like you on the thumb grip. I haven't gone that far yet, but I'm definitely away from being stuck in that little space. Yeah, so it's a good point. So yes, by now I am, it looks like this rather than here like it used to be. And again, some very, very virtuosic people just switched completely and they moved even higher, like there on the bow. So like maybe their thumb grips are actually longer too. So they hold it away from the frog. Not Baroque, not trying to be Baroque, but just like away from the thumb. A lot of people start doing it. So works, whatever works. Um, any master classes to be held in India? Well, I'm thinking about it, honestly, because I have the students in India that I teach on Zoom. Those people I see every like several weeks. Um, Good morning, Professor. How do you prepare for performance psychologically? Oh, that's a huge topic. Huge, 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 huge. I don't think I will be answering this right now, but you know what? I will just do a stream. I will do a stream on psychological preparation. It's a very big topic. Yeah, I should do this. Hmm. Yeah, well, one thing I can tell you, yeah, there is such a thing as preparation. It has to start not on the day of performance even. There is one on the day of performance and it should be starting before. But right now, psychological, I would say look for books that are written on performance anxiety, especially, because usually there are good suggestions there how to deal with this. Because usually, I mean, what is that? Why do we have to prepare for performance psychologically? It's because we usually get nervous. And when we get nervous, a lot of bad things happen that don't happen in practice. And we want to know how to control that and how to control the nerves and how to not lose anything or at least not too much when we're on stage. So yeah, that's why we need psychological preparation, right? So look for stage fright books, and then I'll do a stream on this, actually a separate one. um, so let me see, what is the proper technique to play the hell off note, hold note with the first finger? A flat, E flat, A flat. Thanks a lot. Proper technique to play the note. E flat, A flat, F natural, like this, you mean? Proper technique? Well, you put the finger there and you press with the free finger on that spot. So you move the finger like that laterally into that place. Here you are, and then you move it back. That's how you play it. Um, I how do we move the finger back to the? Well, I mean, I guess I did just show it. Yeah. So you move the finger in this way from the bottom joint. This is the movement that will get you to that note. So. Mhm. I was wondering to ask you how to get a good oboe staccato. Yeah, Paganini number 7. Yes, I do have exercises on staccato, and again, you see, I'm out of time. I can do like maybe, let me just look at other questions, and if we have time, I will get back to staccato, and if not, I'll have to postpone to next thing. I really need to do a video on staccato. I know that I'm overdue. Have a bad habit of bobbing around, shifting body weight from left to right foot and vice versa when playing violin, especially in difficult passages. What is the proper weight placement? The proper one, what is truly in the middle, is to, so if you're already doing this shifting, you probably, some people actually do the following thing. They put the player who wants to wobble on the balance board, or not board maybe, but like on a little trampoline, where you stand, and if you start doing this, you will lose your balance and you will just like, it kind of holds you there. So people do that. Second thing to do is when you stand, actually, and when you stand, you will be like, you just balance yourself here, okay? And then bend your knees, bend your knees and play kind of with unbent knees, not too far, of course, so that you don't get completely stuck in terms of the muscles will work really. But yeah, but that actually is really good for your back, for the posture here. Also, if you can support yourself with your lower abdominals being like tucked in, lower abdominals, not upper abdominals, lower ones. That also helps a lot. And then I don't think you will want to do this because it just will feel so different, but it's very good for posture. So um, yeah, I would, yeah, shifting body weight from left to right foot. It's a lot of times it's actually psychologically, it goes. It's a calming technique for the brain. It's when something is difficult, it's rocking. It's like when people are really upset, they rock back and forth, or they rock this way or that way. That is where it comes from. So you want to distract yourself on one hand, and then just kind of take it easier, make it easier for yourself so that you're not needing to calm yourself down. Oh, my lights are doing something. I think they're telling me that soon they will go off. Yes, The Inner Game of Tennis is a good book about performance, but actually, I would suggest, out of books, I would suggest The Inner Game of Music. I'm sorry that one of my lights in here is just starting. I have 3 lights. It's just the bulb is getting back. It gives me but so far I can still see. How long have I been playing the violin? Don't ask me. All my life, many more years than I wanted to. I started when I was 6, so I have an existential doubt about the Russian and the Franco-Belgian bow techniques. Do I have to choose one, or can both be combined? Not really. I mean, the Russian, you mean the old Russian, the high fits? That's not Russian. It's like if anything, it's Hungarian, but yeah, between this and this, I mean, most of the world right now is playing Franco-Belgian, some versions of Franco-Belgian. Okay, it's a privilege. Well, thank you so much. That's the best violin for beginners. Okay, yeah, somebody knows. What is the best violin? What is the best violin for beginners? That's what I don't know. I'm afraid to tell you, because if it's like a maker that is out there, or rather mass production, I just don't know it. I don't know the lower end. I'm so sorry. Yes, my light is, yes, it's preparing for Halloween. It's exactly right. Yeah, that's right. Halloween is like, what, 3 days? Oh, I should have had my Halloween outfit. Oh no, didn't do it. Okay, let's see. The Inner Game of Music. It's based, the book, The Inner Game of Music, is based on the Inner Game of Tennis, with Barry Green, who was the bass player at Indiana University, by the way. He just completely adapted it to music as well. But there's several more very good books as well to read about that. So people also who are really seriously struggling with nerves. I heard many good things about the website and the course given by Noah Kageyama. I have not looked at this myself, but I heard many good things. Noah Kageyama, he's originally from Juilliard, and then I think I'm afraid to give you some wrong information, but anyway, so I do think that he has medical background, or at least some neuroscience background or something of that sort, and performance. So yeah, he has some very good tips. So let's see, for the master class, do you have any advice on good vibrato while playing softly as an opening meditation of Thais? Yes, I mean, you need to vibrate with intensity when you're playing softly, always with intensity. So people try to do this like lazy vibrato, because this is soft. It has to be the other way around. The vibrato has to be faster when the bow is soft. Okay. Well, there are more. How is it that these questions pop out and I just didn't even see them? Proper technique, I answered. I'm wondering to ask you how to get a good up bow. Well, okay, up bow staccato, yes, fine. When you shift to third position, does your palm touch the violin? My teacher says it helps but when I try it, my ship usually goes to too sharp. I have a small hand. This is a controversial thing, not a controversial, but there are people who say absolutely you have to go. My first teacher was teaching me, or maybe even second one, I can't remember. But my earlier teachers were suggesting that. I think it a lot depends on how your violin is built. So if you have like a thicker bout violin, it's easier to feel that. So if I go like this, you can see that I will be a little bit inward, right? And so then when I play, I probably won't be touching like this because it feels like I'm towards here. And at some point, when I was already studying with Bezrodny, Professor Bezrodny, I remember I was playing 24th Caprice by Paganini, that actually was, and never passages. And then he noticed that I automatically went there, like this, and then around, I guess, probably. So he asked me, why do you do this? Why don't you just go and around? So in other words, don't touch the violin with your hand. And I tried to not to touch. I had no idea where my third position was. I lost my third position, but he said, I recommend that you look at it. And of course, I just knew that meant learn. So I went at home and I practiced. And for a week, I couldn't find my third position, but eventually I did find it. And I was very glad that I did, because I do both now. Whenever, sometimes I do, with touching, and sometimes I do without touching. But there are some people who just swear by touching all the time. Well, good, if it works for them. I know one of them. She's a phenomenal violinist, very virtuosic, and she always goes to touching. So if you go sharp, I would say don't necessarily touch, but you should not do this, of course. This is not good. So again, watch out for this. So it needs to be, it's basically almost there, but not necessarily through this. You see what I mean? So yeah, but it's very individual. So it's too much, just don't touch. Okay, let me see. I think depends on the climate of the Razan, my playing style. It's quite inexpensive, so try a couple things: light, medium, dark. Heel dark is very powerful. Yeah, heel dark is true. I don't know. I mean, maybe I try to. Okay, let me try to switch this light off and see. Maybe that's a little bit too much of Halloween here. Wait a second. How do I switch that off? I think it's the whole thing. No, I'm afraid to touch it. The whole structure, I think, will just come crashing down on me. So we're almost done anyway. We're almost done. Yeah, okay. I thought, all right. So the Razan, yeah, the Razan is fine. My Razan is on a more expensive side, a Liebenzeller. It's made in Germany. It's German made, and I hope it's probably still on the market. But last time I bought it, I think it was $27 back then. And but I had it for like 12 years. It's still fine. So good. Brato. Create colors with the bow. Steven Granados. Create colors with the bow. Colors with the bow are contact points and speed changes. That's basically, in a nutshell, the answer. It is what kind of speed you use and which contact point you are, and how you go in between those. So okay. Let me see. Your example has made me such a better teacher. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I think I am going to stop right now because I just have to. My time is up. I need to switch to the next thing I'm doing. But yes, so I need to give a stream on psychological preparation and staccato. So I will remember those things. Okay, and I will do another one. And that before Anthony Salvo, have you made a comprehensive video on vibrato development? Yes. I think Arsenti already put it there. Look at my channel videos. My biggest videos with most views is still the wrist vibrato, and that's the whole system of wrist vibrato, which it is the best vibrato to learn anyway, because it's more more possibilities, most versatile. Okay, all right. So I hope I did not forget anybody, and I wish you all good night, or good day, or good morning. And I guess I still have Daniel Rodriguez. Okay, something. You know what, Daniel? I have to finish the stream right now. You might want to maybe look for the next one when I'll do this. Remind me that I still need to answer your question. Be the first one to ask it. Okay, so I'll basically do this. All right. So goodbye, everybody. I will see you next time.